Welcome to The Record Show, your virtual spin around the vinyl industry. Brought to you by Radio Wasteland Records. Yes, Midland has a record store. Here's your host, Jim Gleason.
Well, greetings from the Wasteland and welcome to another edition of The Record Show. Thank you all so much for being here and being a part of our channel. If you wouldn't mind, though, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button, and while you're at it, make sure you enable the notifications so you'll know whenever we put new content up. Lots of cool stuff happening here at the Wasteland and on our channel, so we wouldn't want you to miss out on any of that. We've got a cool show coming up for you today. We'll check in again with Ken Norton from Ingram Entertainment on another busy week of new releases hitting the shelves of an indie record store near you this Friday, and we'll take a corporate spin from the Wasteland. But first, the subject of a vinyl resurgence is something I hear often here at the record store. And something like this wouldn't be possible without lots and lots of new people getting into this wonderful hobby of collecting vinyl record albums. We all have to start somewhere, including yours truly. And that got me thinking, what were the first 10 albums I ever purchased on my own? When I was a kid, we always had records around the house. There were things like Elvis and, yes, some Franti and Teicher and some country records. But what albums did I get when I became a young adult, a teenager, and was getting into music into my own right? I thought it might be time for a trip down memory lane and take a look at the first 10 albums that I purchased on my own. Now, these are in no particular order, with the exception of the top two, and we'll get to that here in just a bit. So let's go back to the 80s, my high school years to be specific, and start things off. Early on, I was into the harder rock, as a lot of us were at the time, including these next three albums. One of the first 10 I purchased was Def Leppard's Pyromania. Almost had to have this one. I even saw these guys in concert. Let me look at my ticket stub here. Back in 1983, and the ticket to go see them was $11. I also got the WRIF sticker. Never made it onto my car, by the way. Also in that batch, and concerts from that era, one of the first albums I got was the Screaming for Vengeance album by Judas Priest, as well as AC/DC's Back in Black. And again, kind of symbolic of the era and just the music that I was into at the time in the early 80s. But as I was finishing high school and becoming a little bit more refined, eye roll, I expanded the horizons a little bit. One of the other early albums in my collection was Pink Floyd's Animals. This was, and probably should have been on my top 10, but it just kind of missed out. But this was a great album and one of my introductory albums into Pink Floyd, which now has grown into pretty much most of their library. But this was also really a great one to have. Now, the 80s was also the time of VHS, and there's a story behind the Tubes. What Do You Want from Live? This is a great double LP from the Tubes. And the reason that I got this is because in those early days of VHS rentals, you couldn't get everything you wanted. And there was a lot of bootleg VHS roaming around, including a Tubes concert from the late 70s, early 80s, which my roommates and I had gotten a hold of and just watched just an absolutely wild show by the Tubes. Kind of R-rated by today's standards, I would guess. But it was such a cool visual and concert experience we got to see on lowly VHS that I went out and got a copy of the Tubes live. And this is every bit as energetic on vinyl as it was seeing them perform on tape, at least at that time. But just a cool quasi-punk Tubes album, a little bit of disco, a little bit of obnoxiousness, but still a great early add to my collection. Now for a complete left turn. And I got this next album early on because of its cover. And going in blind, we all do blind purchases from time to time with LPs, but I picked up Bad Music for Bad People in the early 1980s, probably 84-ish, around in there, simply because the cover was intriguing to me. It looked really kind of interesting. And I had no clue at the time what I was getting in for with the Cramps music, that really kind of rockabilly punk sound that they have been known for. And I've since come to really appreciate this album as a part of my collection. Not a huge Cramps fan, but I am a huge fan of this album, and it's always just a fun one to listen to. So next up, I'm getting into the top 4 albums, the first 4 that I gotten. And we had talked about this one previously on the record show. I think we did a spin from the Wasteland a while back. This is the Meet the Bruiser Band, a parody album of music from the JJ and the Morning Crew show on WRIF from the early 80s. And because, as I mentioned before, I was a fan of that show and a fan of the station, when I saw this floating around at a record store, I picked it up, and it's been riding around with me in my collection ever since. Just a fun record. I'm trying specifically to remember where this one came about, but this was definitely, I think, probably the third or fourth album that I purchased as a teenager. It was Supertramp's Crime of the Century. And I think that this was really kind of a album that came into being for me because a lot of my peers in high school were listening to it, and we talked about that kind of music, and this seemed like a cool one to try to get into. And I picked it up primarily because of the song Bloody Well Right and Dreamer, which you would hear on the radio constantly. So this was another early ad. So now I'm up to the first two records that I'd added into my collection in my early years. Most of you know that I'm a Rush fan, and you're probably saying, oh, okay, yeah, Jim, we know that because of your top 10, Permanent Waves is probably the first album you ever bought. No. Permanent Waves is actually the second album I bought as a teenager. Now, the story with this goes a little bit deeper. 1981-ish, 80, 81. This came out in 80, but it would have been around 80, late 80, 81. I had scraped up enough money and went out with my mother to go to Meijer down in the Lansing area, and I thought, I'm going to buy this record. I want to buy a copy of Permanent Waves. I've been borrowing the tape from my buddy, and I wanted my copy of my own. So we went there with the sole purpose of, I'm going to buy this record. Well, truth be told, my mother looked at this and goes, well, you don't really want something like that, do you? Maybe you should buy this and this and this and this and this. And so it came down to it. I was talked out of buying Permanent Waves as the first record purchased with my own money in lieu of Billy Joel's Glass Houses. Now, I've talked with my mother about this, and to this day, she doesn't quite remember that entire exchange. But this was the first record I ever purchased on my own. And there was a little bit of parental peer pressure happening with that. Truthfully, it's because I think she just wanted to listen to this as well, and she wasn't familiar with Rush. But Rush was the second. Permanent Waves was the second record I'd ever bought, right after Billy Joel's Glass Houses. Not that I regret that. This is a great album to have. I just don't go to it as often as I do on the Rush album, but that's for obvious reasons. So there you have it. There is the first 10 records I ever purchased way back when, before I was even thinking about being a vinyl collector, but they still hang with me today. Curious to know what your first 10 records were. If you will, please leave them in the comments below. Let me know what you picked up and when and how that may have helped you get into this wonderful, wonderful world of vinyl collecting. Joining us now on the Record Show, once again, Mr. Ken Norton from Ingram Entertainment, one of the busiest guys in the industry of late. Ken, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Good, man. It's been crazy ever since the RSD list dropped, hasn't it?
It's been really busy, really crazy, in a good way, but a lot of enthusiasm for records out there. So we're right in the middle of that, and it's fun times.
This week being no exception, there is still a lot of cool stuff coming out, not just as we wait for that first drop in June, but in the meantime, there's still lots of great stuff heading our way, isn't there?
It sure is. This week, possibly one of the most interesting records is the Mick Fleetwood and Friends tribute to Peter Green, celebration of the music of Peter Green. That's a 4 LP set. And there's also a super deluxe version that people may want to special order with Blu-ray, and it's pretty pricey. But even the 4 LP set, is for fans. But it's star-studded concert with people like David Gilmour and Pete Townsend and all these folks who really appreciated the music of Peter Green contributing. It's pretty amazing lineup.
It's a star-studded lineup, and I'm looking forward to maybe doing a quality control test on one of those when we get them in the store.
Yeah, there you go.
We've got some other cool things, though, too, this week, don't we?
Sure. Now, for Carrie Underwood fans, she's done a gospel record, and I know the Wasteland's going to have copies of this white vinyl edition of the new Carrie Underwood, which is called My Savior. And straight up gospel, country gospel, but definitely a labor of love and faith from Carrie. There's a live at Nebworth Pink Floyd record coming out this week, and definitely a lot of interest in that from what I'm hearing. Also along those lines, a lot of stuff from the classic rock 70s, 80s era. There's a Gary Moore record that's being issued on blue colored vinyl. It's a bunch of previously unreleased songs from his body of work across his career. You know, the guitar players have revered Mr. Moore for a long time. So those who are Moore fans will want that. There's a Marillion reissue. It's from 2007 on vinyl. That's their 14th album. Available this week. And let's see what else. A little more modern. The new Dropkick Murphys record is coming out this week. There's an indie version of that. It's on Coke Bottle Green vinyl, and that comes out this Friday.
Cool. Now, as I understand it, there was also some late breaking news, if you will, about a very popular artist and a new album.
There is. So Billie Eilish, her second full-length album, third album if you count the EP, will be coming this summer. Just announced, and it's a regular full-on new recording. There will be a indie exclusive version of the vinyl. That's on brown vinyl. I'm not sure what the significance is. Dark brown, as we were told. That's the indie exclusive. There's multiple versions of the CD, and there's even a cassette for those who collect those.
So something to look forward to, and when we get some more firm details on that, we'll share that with everyone.
Yeah,
but I think that has the possibility of being a fairly big release, I would imagine.
I would say so. I mean, she is a really big deal. It could be the biggest selling record of the year. We'll see.
Wait and see. All right, Ken. Well, thanks a lot to look forward to. And real quick question for you, though, sir. Do you remember way back when what some of the first albums that you ever bought were?
Oh, the first full-length albums that I bought, those would have been, show my age, of course, by saying these things. But let's see. I know one of the first ones that I ever owned was the Frampton Comes Alive.
Okay.
That was one of the first records I ever got. I unfortunately had Beach Boys' Pet Sounds at a pretty early age. One of the first things I got.
That's a cool one.
I had already had a single from it and just, loved that. Thought, everything else, this thing is going to be good. And of course, I still play that record till today. And let's see what else from those days. I know that the Eagles' Greatest Hits was one of the first records I got. And I believe there was a Chicago record in there.
Well, cool. Fond memories. When you start thinking back on some of the things that we've had in our collections for years and years.
Yeah. Some of those I still go back to, too. So it's fond memories.
Well, cool. Thank you very much, Ken, for joining us. We will talk again next week with a whole new batch and new releases.
Okay. Super. Thanks, Jim.
And finally today, our spin from the wasteland takes us to corporate America. More specifically, Dow. You may know that our record store is located in Midland, Michigan, and that also happens to be the home of the Dow corporate headquarters. So over its long history, Dow has produced a lot of different audio projects, some of them even on vinyl, from orchestras to choruses and chorales to this interesting little campaign that showed up a while ago called Dow Lets You Do Great Things. This song was at the center of a public relations campaign that began in 1985, in which Dow spent nearly $50 million to improve its image after decades of controversy, including things like napalm and Agent Orange. But this was meant to really kind of get the word out that Dow does do a lot of great things, and to help that, they wrote this song.
The goal was clear: strengthen and improve the image of Dow Chemical Company in the minds of the public. And a great communications campaign began to take shape. Great things have always been a hallmark of the people at Dow. So we decided to show our pride and enthusiasm to the millions of people who know too little about us. That's what the Dow Lets You Do Great Things advertising is all about. It's about helping people reach a better understanding of how special Dow is. Special enough to make great things possible, like food for the hungry, medicines for the sick, special enough to be involved in research designed to improve the lives of people everywhere. Everyone. Dow employees, Dow customers, Dow shareholders, and the millions of people who benefit directly or indirectly from our efforts will now know about the greatness of our contributions to society.
Now, this particular version of Dow Lets You Do Great Things is served up on what's called a Flexi-disc. This is a very thin and very fragile and flexible piece of vinyl, which really has just the audio recording on one side only. And it's meant to be handled very carefully. It's very susceptible to bends and breaks, which would make this absolutely unplayable. As far as the value of something like this goes, it's really kind of hard to say. This is the only one of these I've ever seen, although I'm sure there probably are many, many more out there. But to find something like this in good condition is probably a very, very rare find. And it does make a little sense that something like this showed up at our store. We, again, are in the hometown of the corporate headquarters. This was likely probably in some executive's collection, and it showed up here with a box full of records that was long forgotten. But just remember, Dow does let you do great things.
You're on your way. The world is opening its doors. Start down that road, a road you've never seen before, and you can make a difference in what tomorrow brings. 'Cause Dow lets you do great things. You start to grow, begin to see what you can be. Head for that day when you can reach your destiny. Yes, you can make a difference in what tomorrow brings. 'Cause Dow lets you do great things. Dow lets you do great things.
Baby, round, 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 round.
Thanks for watching The Record Show. If you haven't done so yet, please make sure to subscribe to the Radio Wasteland Records YouTube channel. And be sure to hit that notifications bell so you'll be alerted every time we upload new content.